Welcome to Keiko Vision, a podcast to pump you up to change the world. Hosted by me, Jordana. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to Keiko Vision with Jordana. I'm Jordana, and I will be your host. So today I'm going to talk about the use of police in America. And along with this episode, I'm going to release a Utopia versus Dystopia episode on the same topic. So the Utopia versus Dystopia by Design series is a group of videos on various topics and all showing that this system is designed the way it is for a particular reason and to benefit billionaires and large corporations. And it does so at the expense of the rest of us. So this episode is going to talk about police use in America and how the system in place allows for excessive force and it allows for the oppression of whole groups of people. So the US spends more on policing their own citizens than every country but China spends on their entire military expenditures. In recent years, peaceful protests have been met with excessive force. Pepper spray and rubber bullets, military-style weapons against our own citizens who are protesting that exact action. Is it too much to ask that we treat our citizens with as much respect as we treat the citizens of another country when we're at war? Shouldn't we have the same protections in place? Our soldiers can't open fire on a civilian unless they're actually being attacked. They would be committing a war crime. Excessive force in policing is a problem that we all should be concerned about, if for no other reason, is we all spend our taxpayer money on it. So in a study that showed that in a 5-year period, the 10 cities with the largest payouts paid out over $1 billion. That's all coming from the taxpayer. We have a system in place that's used to control and oppress large populations of people. Our officers are given qualified immunity, which means that unless the exact conduct that they did was ruled unconstitutional, there's no consequences. Things that are obvious, like using a stun gun on a pregnant woman who was refusing to sign a speeding ticket. Something as obvious as that. Police end up with no liability. One of the tools that has given so much power to law enforcement is the war on drugs. So you think of raids, which we've got tens of thousands of them a year. You think of them as a hostage situation, an active shooter, like the life and death situations. But one analysis showed that only 7% falls into that category. And over 60% involve drug searches. There are tons of examples of botched raids. And one of the most well-known is Breonna Taylor, who was shot and killed during a raid that should have never happened. Breonna Taylor was a 26-year-old emergency room technician who was Black. Police got a warrant based on the belief that she was allowing 2 other people to use her house to receive packages of drugs. So one of the guys did have packages delivered to her house, but that was somebody that she had been dating and was no longer dating. So she was in bed with her boyfriend. She heard a loud bang at the door. Her current boyfriend thinks that it's her ex-boyfriend trying to break in. Her boyfriend fires his gun because he's thinking somebody's trying to break into his house, hits the officer in the thigh. So the police return fire and One officer shot 10 rounds into the apartment. Brianna was hit 5 times and later died. A year and a half before that took place, in the same community, a couple and 3 kids were held up at gunpoint. 17 SWAT officers burst into their house because they smelled weed. Warrants are meant to be an oversight, but one study of Utah, electronically submitted warrants, half the time the judge signed them in under 3 minutes. And there were hundreds that were signed in less than 30 seconds. There are way too many mistakes. All you need is probable cause or a reasonable belief that a crime will be or has been or is being committed at that location. A lot of times these come from confidential informants that are trying to get themselves out of trouble. So in one clip, there was Little Rock police who blew open the door of an apartment thinking it was a coke dealer. They didn't find any drugs. The guy had a door camera, so the confidential informant, he has video of him coming up to his door, turning around and walking away without any interaction. So they don't find any drugs. The confidential informant was lying. And they realize that he has a security system and has it on video. And they are cracking up, laughing about how they blew up this guy's front door, how it was worth coming into work that day. There was a dog on the other side of that door. There's been cases of police making informants up, including misleading information on warrant applications, and way too often just not doing the basic research to ensure that they're getting the right person. There's a clip of a family that moved into a house 2 months later, served a warrant for drugs. They threw a flashbang grenade into a 2-year-old's crib, then wouldn't let the mom hold her baby while the baby is scared and hurt, told her to shut up and sit down. And they said they didn't realize that a family lived there, that there were kids. But there was a minivan parked in the driveway with 4 car seats in it. They were looking for somebody else who lived in the house, who probably lived in the house before them. And when they found him, he surrendered peacefully. In Chicago, there was a video of a woman and her kids being held up at gunpoint by a SWAT team looking for someone who had been in prison, serving a 20-year sentence for murder at the time. Once they have a warrant, there's not much in terms of limits of what they can do. And there's no consequences. Even if when they break through the front door of the wrong person, they don't even have to pay to get the front door fixed. And this is happening all over the place. When did it become acceptable to let our government do this to its citizens? And what happens when there's tons of outrage and something does get attention is the family gets money. And that comes from all of us. So we're the ones paying for it. It's not like it's coming out of the cops' retirement fund. He or she is protected from qualified immunity. The war on drugs and the excessive use of raids terrorizes entire communities. I watched a series on Netflix this past week, and it was called How to Change Your Mind. It's based on a book by Michael Pollan. It is a really good 4-part series on psychedelics. So there was an episode on LSD, on magic mushrooms, MDMA, otherwise known as ecstasy, and mescaline, the active ingredient in peyote. I was amazed by how much these had in common and how most of the backstories of these drugs was that they were being used or researched by scientists and psychiatrists and psychologists as ways to treat people in various ways and in various situations. And the US government stepped in and demonized it. We created this war on drugs, and it's a way to control populations of people, whether they're hippies or people of color. But the potential of these, if used in the right circumstances, with the right mindset, and with people trained to oversee, could minimize the dependence on other substances. And I know that's kind of a weird, should we just trade one drug for another? But these drugs can help users gain a different perspective that sticks with them well past the time that the drug is out of their system. There was a story of a veteran suffering extreme PTSD and 3 times took ecstasy, and it changed his life. People who were suicidal and had extreme postpartum depression, they describe it as short-circuiting that desire. It was like it cut it off completely. So many different mental health problems, OCD and depression, anxiety, alcoholism, addiction. Psychedelics have the potential to revolutionize mental health care and minimize human suffering and dependence on pharmaceuticals. But instead, we bend over backwards for pharmaceutical companies. And this is like in every other area. When big businesses and billionaires write the rules, they are not writing the rules in the best interests of society at large. So after I watched How to Change Your Mind on Netflix, I had to go back and re-watch Dope Sick, where one family, the Sackler family, has single-handedly caused a nation of suffering for an entire generation. They caused the opioid epidemic. They knew what they were doing, and they covered it up every step of the way in favor of money. And the system that we have in place allowed that. I'm going to take notes and do a separate podcast on it, but nobody in that family will face criminal charges. They will all remain billionaires when it's said and done. It's sickening. Our war isn't on drugs. If our war was on drugs, we'd be going after Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family. We're using the war on drugs to control and intimidate people of this country. We need to reimagine the police. Not defund the police, but refocus the police on protecting and serving the people of this country and not intimidating them in their own space. There's an interesting movement going on to decriminalize nature. And I looked it up and I was a little disappointed, I'm not going to lie, that it only focuses on the psychedelics. Because if we decriminalize nature and include weed in that, decriminalizing doesn't make it legal, but it means that we're not going to use our taxpayer money to prioritize it in any way. And if we decriminalize some of these things and allocate resources towards addressing them in different ways, so many people are struggling with addiction. And if something as basic as a mushroom could help them, why are we spending resources to stop that? Next week, I'm going to talk about jails and fines and civil asset forfeiture and other ways that our government impedes on our personal liberty. So that's it for this show. Got 2 more episodes before the end of the Utopia versus Dystopia by Design series. After that's done, I'm going to work on the next series, which is going to be what the effects of this. So this series was based on, how a system is designed to benefit the extremely fortunate and the extremely rich at the expense of everyone else. And then the next series is going to talk about where we are because of that. And addiction is definitely going to be included in that. And so is climate change and a whole generation dependent on various pharmaceuticals. So thanks for listening, and see you next Tuesday.
Keiko, the social app. K-A-K-O. Keiko, the social app. K-A-K-O. Keiko, the social app. Keiko rules. Keiko, the social app. Billionaire greed? Keiko, the social app. Destroying America. Keiko, the social app. T-minus 7 years and counting. Keiko, the social app.